When a woman crosses 65, society quietly moves her into a mental box it never announces out loud, a box labeled past, past desire, past relevance, past strength, past ambition. And the most dangerous lie placed inside that box is this, that living alone at this age is a sign of abandonment, weakness, or failure. But psychology tells a very different story, and it's time someone finally said it clearly. Living alone after 65 is not a loss of power, it is the return of it. Because for the first time in a woman's life, the noise fades, the expectations soften, the performance ends, the constant emotional labor demanded by the world finally loosens its grip. No one is watching to judge her usefulness anymore, and that freedom is terrifying to those who never learned how to exist without applause. But to a woman who has survived decades of sacrifice, silence becomes sacred. From a psychological perspective, solitude at this stage is not isolation, it is integration. It is the mind finally syncing with the self instead of chasing approval. For decades, women are trained to be mirrors. Reflect your husband's needs, reflect your children's emotions, reflect society's definition of good. By the time a woman reaches her later years, she has spent a lifetime responding instead of initiating. Living alone interrupts that pattern. It forces the nervous system to reset. It allows identity to come from within rather than from obligation. Research consistently shows that older women who choose independence often have higher emotional regulation, stronger self-concept, and better stress management than those who remain in emotionally draining environments. Why? Because chronic emotional responsibility ages the brain faster than solitude ever could. Constantly managing someone else's moods, expectations, and disappointments keeps the nervous system in survival mode. Living alone finally allows the body to rest. There is also a brutal truth society avoids. Many women over 65 are not lonely because they live alone. They are lonely because they spent their lives surrounded by people who never truly saw them. Loneliness is not about absence of company, it is about absence of understanding. And when a woman finally lives alone, she no longer has to dilute herself to be tolerated. Psychologically, this is the phase where wisdom consolidates, memory becomes selective, drama loses its appeal, validation stops being addictive. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making and emotional regulation, operates with clarity because it is no longer hijacked by constant external demands. Living alone sharpens intuition, it strengthens boundaries. It teaches a woman to listen to her body instead of overriding it. Many fear that independence at this age means vulnerability, but dependence is far more dangerous. Dependence forces silence. Dependence forces compromise of dignity. Dependence trains a woman to accept less care than she deserves because she fears abandonment. A woman who lives alone learns something radical, that her safety comes from preparation, not permission. She organizes her life around stability, not sacrifice. She plans, she adapts, she chooses. There is also an emotional maturity that only comes from being alone long enough to hear your own thoughts without distraction. Regret surfaces, grief surfaces, anger surfaces. But so does clarity, and clarity is healing. Suppressed emotions do not disappear with age, they wait. Living alone gives them space to be processed rather than projected. This is why many women report feeling emotionally lighter in their later years despite physical aging. Their minds are no longer carrying invisible weight. They are not negotiating peace daily. They are not tiptoeing around fragile egos. They are not performing gratitude for crumbs. They wake up when they want, eat what they want, think without interruption. That autonomy is not small, it is revolutionary. Psychology also tells us that autonomy is directly linked to self-esteem. When a woman makes decisions independently, her brain reinforces a sense of competence. Each solved problem strengthens confidence. Each quiet morning affirms self-trust. This is why women who live alone often appear mentally younger than their peers. Their minds are exercised by choice, not constrained by duty. There is a cultural myth that a woman's value peaks when she is needed, but need is not the same as respect. And many women discover painfully late that being indispensable often meant being invisible. Living alone breaks that illusion. It teaches a woman that her worth is intrinsic, not transactional. And then there is peace. Not the fragile peace that depends on others behaving well, but the deep, grounded peace that comes from predictability and control over one's environment. No emotional ambushes, no unresolved conflicts echoing through rooms, just stillness. And in that stillness, something extraordinary happens. Creativity returns, curiosity returns, humor returns. The mind becomes playful again. Some fear cognitive decline with solitude, but stimulation does not only come from people. It comes from reading, learning, reflection, routine, and purpose. Many women living alone engage more with their interests because they finally have uninterrupted time. Their minds are not dull, they are focused. Living alone also dismantles the fear of abandonment. Once a woman realizes she can survive alone, fear loses its leverage. She no longer stays out of desperation. She chooses connection rather than clinging to it. That shift changes everything. And perhaps the most uncomfortable truth of all is this: many women become emotionally healthier once they stop being constantly available. Availability is draining. Accessibility is exhausting. Living alone introduces selective connection. Relationships become intentional, not obligatory. Energy is conserved. Emotional burnout fades. There is also dignity in self-reliance, asking for help when needed, not out of helplessness, but wisdom. Setting systems in place, adapting the environment. This is not weakness, this is mastery. A woman over 65 living alone is not waiting for life to happen. She is finally living it on her own terms. She is no longer shrinking to fit into roles that outlived their usefulness. She is expanding inward. And the world struggles with that, because a woman who does not need approval cannot be controlled. A woman who enjoys her own company cannot be manipulated. A woman who has survived herself in silence is unshakable. Living alone at this age is not an ending. It is a return to self. It is the stage where identity is no longer negotiated, where love is no longer begged for, where peace is non-negotiable, where time is finally her own. And that is not loneliness. That is power. And that power doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't argue. It doesn't explain. It simply exists, calm and steady. And that is exactly why it unsettles people. Because society is comfortable with older women only when they are quiet caretakers or grateful dependents. An older woman who lives alone, thinks independently, and chooses her pace disrupts a deeply ingrained narrative. Psychology calls this autonomy threat, when someone's independence exposes the unnecessary compromises others have made. At this stage of life, emotional selectivity becomes a strength. The brain naturally prioritizes meaningful interactions over frequent ones. This is not withdrawal, it is refinement. A woman living alone learns to recognize which conversations nourish her and which ones drain her. She stops answering every call. She stops explaining every decision. Her emotional economy becomes efficient, and efficiency brings peace. There is also something profound about routines formed without negotiation. Morning light through the window, tea prepared exactly the way she likes it, silence that is not empty but spacious. These small consistencies stabilize the nervous system. They reduce cortisol. They improve sleep. They regulate mood. A calm environment is not a luxury. It is psychological medicine, especially after decades of chaos disguised as family life. Many women discover that their bodies feel safer when they live alone. Trauma stored in the nervous system finally gets a chance to unwind. There is no constant alertness, no anticipation of conflict, no emotional scanning of the room. The body relaxes, and when the body relaxes, healing becomes possible. This is why some chronic pains ease, why anxiety softens, why breath feels deeper. Living alone also allows grief to be honored properly. Losses that were postponed for years finally surface. Dreams that were never lived. Love that was never returned. Choices that were made out of duty rather than desire. Alone, a woman can mourn honestly without being rushed to move on for the comfort of others. And grief processed fully becomes wisdom rather than bitterness. There is an inner authority that develops in solitude. Decisions are no longer second-guessed. Intuition sharpens because it is no longer overridden. A woman begins to trust her inner voice because it has proven reliable. That trust radiates outward. Others sense it. Boundaries become effortless. Respect follows. Psychologically, this phase is marked by self-congruence, when actions align with values. There is no longer a split between who she is and who she pretends to be. That alignment creates integrity, and integrity creates quiet confidence. She no longer needs to convince anyone of her worth. Even relationships change texture. When she chooses companionship, it is from desire, not fear. She enjoys connection without surrendering herself. She welcomes presence without sacrificing peace. That balance was impossible when survival depended on others. And perhaps the most underestimated transformation is this: joy returns in unexpected forms. Simple pleasures feel richer. Laughter feels lighter. Curiosity awakens. The mind is no longer burdened by constant responsibility. It becomes available to life again. Living alone teaches patience with oneself, with time, with change. It teaches adaptability without panic. It teaches that strength does not always look like endurance. Sometimes it looks like release. A woman over 65 who lives alone is not avoiding life. She is choosing depth over noise. She is choosing clarity over chaos. She is choosing herself, finally, without apology, without justification, without needing permission from a world that benefited from her silence for far too long. And choosing herself does not mean shutting the world out. It means deciding how the world is allowed in. That distinction is everything. For most of her life, access to her time, her emotions, her labor was assumed. Now it is curated. That curation protects mental health more effectively than any late life advice ever could. There is also a shift in how fear operates. Earlier in life, fear was loud. Fear of being alone, fear of being judged, fear of not being enough. In later years, fear becomes quieter because experience has already disproven most of it. A woman who lives alone realizes that many of the things she was warned about never actually destroyed her. Loneliness did not break her. Silence did not erase her. Aging did not diminish her mind. That realization rewires confidence at a deep psychological level. Time itself feels different when it belongs to you. Hours are no longer broken into fragments of obligation. Attention stretches. Thoughts complete themselves. Reflection deepens. This is why many women report heightened awareness and insight in solitude. The mind finally has room to think in full sentences instead of interruptions. Living alone also changes how a woman remembers her life. Memory becomes kinder when it is not constantly challenged by others' interpretations. She gets to define her own story. She reclaims authorship. That narrative control is deeply stabilizing, especially in later years when identity can feel threatened by physical change. There is an unexpected resilience that forms too. When something goes wrong, she handles it. Not because she enjoys difficulty, but because she knows she can. That competence builds a quiet courage that no reassurance from others could ever replace. Independence teaches a woman that reassurance is internal. The emotional labor she once performed invisibly no longer drains her. She is not managing moods, predicting reactions, or cushioning truth. Emotional honesty becomes natural, and honesty simplifies life. Simplicity reduces stress. Stress reduction preserves mental clarity. Many women discover that living alone sharpens their moral compass. Without constant compromise, values become clearer. What matters rises to the surface. What never mattered falls away. This clarity brings peace even when life is imperfect. There is also humor that returns. Not performative humor, but private amusement. The ability to laugh without explaining, to smile without reason, to enjoy moments without witnesses. That kind of joy is deeply grounding. Living alone teaches that companionship is a bonus, not a requirement. That love does not have to be loud to be real. That presence does not need permanence to be meaningful. This understanding liberates relationships from pressure and restores authenticity. And slowly, almost without noticing, a woman realizes she is no longer waiting. Not waiting to be chosen, not waiting to be validated, not waiting for permission to rest, to speak, to enjoy. Life is no longer on hold. She becomes rooted rather than reactive, calm rather than compliant, whole rather than useful. And that internal wholeness continues to grow, quietly, steadily, without any need for closure or explanation. And here is the truth that deserves to be said without softness or apology. A woman over 65 who can live alone has already won a battle most people never even realize they are fighting. She has outlived illusions. She has outgrown fear-based attachment. She has survived being needed more than being valued. And instead of collapsing under the weight of years, she has distilled herself into something rare: clarity. Living alone at this stage is not about rejecting love, family, or connection. It is about refusing to abandon oneself any longer. It is about choosing peace over performance, dignity over dependency, depth over noise. It is the moment a woman stops shrinking her life to make others comfortable and starts expanding her inner world because it finally belongs to her. This is not loneliness. This is sovereignty. This is not emptiness. This is space. This is not decline. This is arrival. A woman who can sit alone with her thoughts and still feel whole is unbreakable, because nothing can be taken from someone who no longer gives themselves away.